what we want to do is take a minute to talk about the process we want to engage y'all in terms of reflecting about your own practice. A big part of what we're doing today is to get you to think about your teaching, to think about strategies that you use in your classroom, approaches that you have, challenges that you've faced, successes that you've had, and then think about those in the context of using technology. So you can go to the next slide.
You're clicking on
well, yeah, I can try that too. This is a model we use. This is kind of an abstracted model of what we're going to do. And the model suggests that as you go through this process of reflecting about your teaching, that you approach this from the standpoint of a challenge. And you think about the things that you confront when you're planning to teach in the classroom that are particularly challenging or problematic. So we're going to ask you all to do that in just a minute. Then we're going to engage you in some discussion about the context within which you teach. And part of this model we'll do later in the day, the TEI model, tries to take into account context at a very high level so that you can think about the various contexts that are in play when you're planning to teach and when you're actually teaching and working with students. We'll have you continuously taking into consideration the various tools that you can use. We've already done that, and we're going to continue to do that. So while this process spirals and it has kind of a linear form to it as you look at it, there's a lot of overlap in the way these things work out. So we've already looked at tools, and we'll continue to look at tools. But what we want to do is to push towards the examination of these tools in the context and in kind of the personalized situations that you have in your teaching. We'll think about new approaches, and then we're going to ask you all to share what you've learned with each other so that as a community you can learn from one another and perhaps be inspired to do things in your classes that you might not have done before, or to do them even better than you're already doing them. So this is kind of a model that we'll use, and we'll take an approach of inquiry. The stance that we want to take is that all of us together are entering into an inquiry to explore our own professional practice, to think about how we can refine it and enhance it in ways that take advantage of all the tools that are available to us. So the first thing we're going to do is to look at a challenge and trying to get y'all in a position where you've identified and you've thought about some challenges that you face. And we want to take advantage of the community that we have in this room. So Todd is going to lead us to an exercise right here where we're going to collaboratively explore challenges that you might face in your teaching and then think about ways that we can address those.
All right, so technologies come in all kinds of different forms. So I'm going to actually drop back a few years for this one. About 20 years ago, I was teaching a class, and it was an introductory psychology class, and I was talking about the insidious effects of LSD. How you can ingest this substance, and then years later, months later, weeks later, you never know exactly when, you get these flashbacks. And a young lady in the front row said, "Whew, that is so true." So I thought I moved over here a little bit. And so I started talking about the next drug. And as I'm talking about the next drug, this young lady raises her hand again and says, "This man knows what he is talking about." This is a class with 200 students. So I knew that this young lady wanted to share and she was wanting to be involved in this, but it wasn't exactly appropriate. And not only was it not appropriate, it was scaring me a little bit, because when you teach Introduction to Psychology, the section or the chapter after biological basis of behavior is motivation and emotion. And that meant that the next thing we're going to be talking about is sex. And I'm from Michigan, which is a fairly repressed state, and I was so scared that I was going to end up talking a little bit about sex and having her or somebody else say, "Ooh, I do that too." And I couldn't even handle that. So, as is what should happen with teaching and learning, is now I have an issue. The issue in class is, how can I have a student share, but do it in a way that's very appropriate? I got to thinking a little bit, and I thought, she did keep raising her hand and saying these inappropriate things, but there's also a lot of other times when I'm asking questions of other students, and I can't get them to talk at all. And part of the reasons I can't get them to talk, of course, is keep this in mind all the time. Anytime someone volunteers in a classroom, especially a big classroom, a room this size, it's a pretty stress-provoking moment. Because if you happen to say something that is inappropriate or perhaps off topic or whatever, sometimes colleagues aren't all that forgiving, and that's true for students as well as professional colleagues. People remember something that was said, and in the first year of medical school, if someone says something in the first week or two, there's a lot to lose and not a lot to gain by raising your hand. So I got to thinking, okay, I need an activity or some way, not an activity, some way to get ideas into the room and have really good discussions. Therein came the technology of the day. So what we're going to do in this, which I was kind of excited about here, or I still am very excited about, we're going to start with old school technology, and then we're going to move and blend it right into new technology and show you how you could do the whole thing with new technology but also how you could do it with an old technology too. And so we're going to blend the two together. So the first thing is everybody needs an index card. Now I've already given them to the last couple tables over there, so they should have them back there. Here's some others. Is everyone please make sure you have an index card in your hand. There we go. Pass them around. There's some there. Everybody got one now? Yes. Okay. As you're playing with those, by the way, this is one thing that I love to have. I work with faculty all over campus, and I have a friend now who teaches a 400 student section of biology. And she tells her students always bring index cards. And she does some things with technology and projecting things up on the screen. Some things she has write out. Sometimes she collects these, sometimes she doesn't. If you're teaching 100 students and you say to your students, take out a piece of paper at the end of class, take out a piece of paper and write in 30 seconds what was the one thing that's still a little muddy. It's called the muddiest point. If they take out a piece of paper, they're going to rip out, you know what this looks like, right? You end up with a stack of papers, some 8.5 by 11, some 11 by 14. Sometimes they have the little things down the side. Sometimes they'll rip them in half and give them to people. And you have this mass of papers that you take. With a set of index cards and 75 students, I can have them write a quick prompt at the end of class, hand them to me, stick them in my pocket like this, and I walk out. And while I ride the bus home, I flip through them very quickly. So there's ways of doing that. And again, we're going to show the technology version of this too. So here is the technique that I came up with about 20 years ago. Have them take out a piece of paper or an index card, and then I tell them, first time you have to explain it, and after that, you're all set. Is we're going to do this activity so that you're going to respond to a prompt, and then we're going to use the information in the room, but it's going to be passed around in such a way that nobody's going to know whose idea ends up where. That way we can discuss all the ideas in the room, but disassociate them from the individuals. Make sense? The way that's going to happen, I'll give the prompt, you write it out, we're going to trade 6 times with different people, and that'll move these cards all over the room. Now, if you happen to be the only person in the room writing with a big felt-type purple pen, you may want to write with something else. If you've got very distinctive handwriting, you're going to want to print. Okay, so that's it. CSI could probably figure out it's your card if they work really hard, but you want to have it so that the colleagues don't get it right off real easily. That said, I always do tell my students, if you're really mortally and would be mortally embarrassed to have something figured out it came from you, then don't write that. The idea here is to be, it's somewhat anonymous, but it can't be completely. So, again, I've done this for close to 20 years. It works out really, really well. So we're going to actually try this so you can see what it looks like. So here's your prompt in here. Oh, and I will say one last thing here is this works really, really well early in a course, or if you haven't built a lot of community where you need to get some quick responses going and the students just aren't responding. The other thing it works really well for are sensitive topics. Because when I did get to stuff, like I've been teaching since before AIDS was around, so when AIDS was really coming around, you start talking to people, well, in fact, it can still be, why would you engage in sexual intercourse when the result could be death, unprotected sex? Why would you do that? I don't want someone in the front row saying, ooh, I got 3 reasons. That still makes me a little nervous. So what we want to do is get on the cards and we're going to talk about them. So the prompt here we're going to go with for now is, what is one issue or concern you have with respect to teaching or creating an effective learning environment? Essentially, what is one teaching challenge that you're facing now or you have faced? What's a teaching challenge that you have? Either you're teaching or creating an effective learning environment for your students.